I mentioned earlier that China is the biggest destination with over 3/4 of all cattle from Australia going to China, which is great. It's put enormous upward pressure on prices in Australia and fantastic for Australian dairy farmers that they can get for their heifers such big prices as apply at the moment. But in the back of my mind, and others in the industry, what happens when China drops out? In 2004, the dairy cattle trade to China was going gangbuster, and it stopped overnight. The financial tap was turned off in Beijing, and a lot of people got themselves burnt. We're now back once again going gangbuster to China. How long will it last? Who knows? But I guess at some stage that market will disappear. The main issue facing dairy cattle exporters is supply, not finding contracts but finding the cattle to fill them. And all of the major exporters have moved offshore to supply cattle. So exporting out of New Zealand, Uruguay and the States. Australia is the major world supplier regardless of where they're sourced from. And I think it's great that those profits are being repatriated back to Australian companies, even though we might be supplying turkey out of Uruguay or China out of New Zealand or whatever, the expertise and the profits come back home. Quick look at sheep. A touch under 3 million sheep exported last year. Those traditional markets of the Middle East, which for the last 20 years took 99-point-something% of our cattle, of our sheep rather, this year has changed quite significantly with a big chunk in there of other, and that's turkey, which has taken a lot of sheep in the tail end of the year and so far early this year. But will it continue? I'm not sure. Sheep numbers have been declining because of reduced supply. The value of the industry has stabilised out. Less sheep, but they're worth more going on board. Big picture issues. Food security is a major driver behind our markets in the Middle East. Sheep meat is a staple food, and having fresh sheep in the market every day is an important issue. We do have many competitors with sheep coming from particularly North Africa, Syria, Iran and elsewhere, but Australia can supply, despite the limited numbers available, big shipments of good quality sheep with good infrastructure and so on. Our sheep prices delivered to the Middle East have gone up exponentially because of the domestic price in Australia and the Australian dollar and freight costs, but regardless of that, the countries are still paying for them and would take more if we could supply. Animal welfare is an important issue, and I'm going to come on that in just 1 second. Finally, goats. It's a niche industry. Just over 80,000 goats exported, principally to Malaysia, the balance to Southeast Asia, and virtually all exported by air. Goat numbers anywhere between 50 to 90,000 goats a year and a value of about $10 or $11 million FOB. Finally, just a few comments about animal welfare, because it is a major issue confronting our industry and something at the forefront of our minds all the time. The community expectation, and it's certainly I think the industry expectation also, is that our responsibility doesn't stop at the farm gate or at the port or whatever, but if we're exporting Australian animals, we do have a responsibility as custodian of them beyond our shores through to the end of their life, even though we may not be the owners of those animals. And that requires a commitment from the people involved. It involves having appropriate facilities, appropriate training, and appropriate contingencies for the unexpected. The preparation of stock in Australia is really first class for export. It's well regulated and we do it well. Likewise, the shipping issues I think are pretty professional and done well. This graph shows the success rate of delivery, and it just relates to mortalities. But basically the top line of red, cattle, says that there's damn nearly 100% of cattle arrive and are discharged safely. If you're looking at the trade to Indonesia and Southeast Asia, it's so close to 100% it doesn't make much difference. Most of the mortalities are on the long-haul voyages to the Middle East and Russia and elsewhere, but it's still very, very small. The graph for sheep has been steadily rising and now plateaued out at something above 99%. So there's still nearly 1% of sheep don't make it, but 99% plus do walk off the other end and reach their destination safely. And the bottom graph is goats, and you can see back in the 1990s, the goat story was very patchy and unsatisfactory. That related to shipboard mortalities. Goats are difficult, tricky things to export by sea. Because of those difficulties, shipboard export of goats on long haul is now banned, and virtually all of the goats leaving Australia are leaving by air now, hence the graph going up to pretty much 100%. Given that concept of whole of life responsibility, animal welfare responsibility, what's the industry doing about it? Well, a whole host of things. The Australian end's in pretty good shape. The shipping end is in pretty good shape. And the weak link, if there is one, or there is one, the weak link is after discharge, handling of our stock, slaughtering of them, feedlotting, etc. And that's where most of the effort has gone. There are industry-funded technical people in Bahrain looking after the Middle East and in Indonesia. And there's a steady stream of consultants and experts in veterinary science, nutrition, animal handling, whatever, visiting our key markets, involved in training programs, etc. There is a lot to be done. It's a big ask to expect to change animal welfare quickly across a vast array of markets and lots of importers, given that we don't, in most cases, own the animals or the facilities or have direct responsibility. But nonetheless, that's the challenge, and the industry's having a pretty good go at it. I'd just like to finish, Mr. Chairman, with this last slide. The whole concept of downstream support is pretty dear to my heart. I was the first industry-funded technical person sent overseas. I was in Bahrain from 1990 to 92, working around the Gulf states with importers of, at that stage it was sheep and goats, no cattle, working in the feedlots and the abattoirs and so on. I constructed or oversaw construction of the first bugle yards in the Gulf states, and I introduced this bit of technology, which is a plastic bag tied onto the end of a stick, to train the people in that feedlot how to handle Australian sheep, that you don't need to beat them or drag them or whatever else. That's in 1991. I go back to the region fairly frequently, and it gives me a great sense of pride and satisfaction when I go past and I see that the technology I introduced 20 years ago is still there. There's a long way to go, but it's incremental, little bits and pieces here and there. And when I look back over a 20-year time frame, each year it's a small bit, but over 20 years we've come ahead an enormous way. And having Australians on the ground training and mentoring our customer staff has been really valuable. So may it continue. Thank you.